As you can probably tell from the title, spoiler wording for the entire series of Ozark. The comparison between Ozark and Breaking Bad is easy to make. Both stories center around a normal, everyman protagonist who enters the seedy underbelly of his profession. Both Walter and Marty seem to be normal, well-meaning family men who just want to do what's best for their family. Both get in over their heads with different elements of the drug business, and we watch as they go deeper and deeper into that world in an attempt to escape it. The two protagonists enlist the help of a younger, down-on-their-luck protege, proceeding to ruin that person's life by dragging them into their mess. Both shows also ask us the same general question. How do they make it out of this unwinnable scenario? The answer ends up being the same as well. They don't. The eventual conclusion of these shows couldn't be more different, even if the showrunners came to the same answer to the same question. In Breaking Bad, we grow to care about a handful of characters once Walter White completes his heel turn. At various points in the show, we realize that he's too far gone to be truly redeemed and start to invest in people like Jesse Pinkman and Hank as our primary rooting interests. As bad as Breaking Bad got, I had one condition by the end of the show. If Jesse survives, it's all okay. Breaking Bad's ending wasn't perfect. Plenty of people were upset with it, and it was clear that the writers weren't exactly sure how they'd eventually end it when they started sending Walt down his path. All things considered, though, the freedom of Jesse combined with Walt's last act of redemption were enough to put a bow on one of the best series of all time, even if the ending required some cleanup in the form of a 2-hour movie telling us what happened after Jesse's escape. Ozark's ending was a considerable amount messier and far less satisfying. Ruth was Ozark's Jesse Pinkman. She was the one character that every viewer wanted to see make it out alive, regardless of what happened to Marty and Wendy. Obviously, that's not what we got. So let's take a look at where we're at now that the credits rolled on Ozark. Ruth is dead. The birds are still under the control of the cartel, albeit under a different leader. And Jonah fucking killed a guy.
Brick killed a guy.
Let's talk about Jonah killing Mel first, since that's the last thing we see in the series. Jonah has been dragged down by his parents for the entirety of the show. He's a smart, innocent young man who's been corrupted by the family business. This final killing is the completion of that corruption. Just look at the face of Marty and Wendy in this scene. Does that look like two people who don't want their son to shoot this man? No. Marty almost looks like it's an inevitability. Like, see, told ya, you shouldn't have messed with us. He doesn't look upset at all. Of course, this scene is meant to mirror Buddy killing Garcia in the first season. Buddy was Jonah's hero and one of his best friends throughout the series. But Garcia was an objectively bad guy, and Buddy was a seasoned gangster. Mel, on the other hand, was a well-meaning detective who just wanted to get to the truth. From his introduction, the audience began to root for him because, despite being the clear antagonist for the birds, he just wants to get to the bottom of things. To give the show credit, Ozark has been building to Jonah eventually killing someone since its first season. More recently, the show's put special emphasis on what taking a life can do to someone's conscience. Ruth is visibly different after killing Javi, and after Rachel kills Nelson, she goes on about how it's not like killing an animal and how it's really weighing on her. Even after Ruth explains how bad of a guy Nelson was, she says,
"I still killed a person."
With Mel, Jonah doesn't even have that out. Sure, he was coming for their family, but is that really enough to justify murdering someone? What will this do to the rest of his life, or short-term or long-term? For that matter, how did Jonah or Charlotte react to the death of Ruth? They don't even know she's in danger by the time the show ends. This all sounds like the beginning of a new chapter rather than the end of a book, and that segues into my next major issue with Ozark's finale.
Are we gonna fucking do this shit or what?
As I said before, Ruth is Ozark's Jesse Pinkman. By the back half of season 4, I was ready to cut bait with Marty and Wendy both, as long as Ruth and the kids made it out alive. Ruth was pure. She was deserving. She had suffered for her connection with Marty, but she was stronger for it. To be fair, Ruth's death at this point made logical sense. There was too many loose ends to both end the series and leave her alive. The issue isn't that her death came out of nowhere, it's that it wasn't satisfying in the slightest. Ruth didn't die protecting the kids or protecting Marty or doing anything righteous. Sure, she looked brave and she stood her ground, but that's not enough. She deserves so much more than that. Ruth was one of the only characters in the show that looked like she could have a bright future. Marty and Wendy are still indebted to the cartel by the end of the show, but Ruth had a chance for a fresh start, just as Jesse Pinkman did at the end of El Camino.
You don't have to do this. You can be something else.
She knows.
Someone had to die here. Ozark could never have a purely happy ending. My issue is that by the writers ending it where it did, there was no room to allow our favorite character to escape. The biggest innocent bystander of the bird's destruction was left dead, alongside her father, cousin, uncle, and boyfriend.
If I'm being honest, I just can't believe it's over.
The lack of redemption in Ozark might be the most disappointing element of its ending. By the end, it was Wendy, not Marty, who fulfilled the selfish, power-hungry, Walter White-esque role of the show. Marty became little more than a subservient side character in Wendy's story. This was unquestionably a weakening of his character. For all of his faults, Marty was a strong and decisive leader throughout the entirety of the series. We root for him for that reason. When he's following the whims of a selfish and borderline delusional Wendy, we start to lose respect for him. Marty's redemption would be standing up to Wendy in some way, possibly to prevent her from harming Ruth, the one person outside the family for which Marty should feel some love and responsibility. By standing by and letting her be killed, Marty only went deeper into his character flaw rather than experiencing any sort of redemption. Wendy, the character who needed redemption the most, found it in a monologue to her children after manipulating her way into a meeting with them. Sure, Wendy owned up to her flaws, admitted fault, and finally told us that she's not as delusional as she seems, but is that enough? One of the most ruthless, heartless people we've seen in the show gets a few minutes to clear the air and now we're good? I don't know. Similar to Marty, I felt that Wendy's only redemption could come by saving Ruth, probably by sacrificing herself to save Ruth. Sure, she seemed pretty upset that Ruth had to die, but that's a far cry from interfering with it. When the show was coming to an end, I felt that the only possibility of a satisfying ending could be if Wendy and Marty both die while redeeming themselves, probably by saving Ruth. Instead, they sat back and let her die.
Have you changed?
Yes, ma'am.
Ruth's redemption was cut short as well, the redemption of her name. Langmore carries a stigma with it, referred to as a curse by both the characters and the showrunners. Instead of bailing and creating a new life under a new name, Ruth decides to keep her name and make something out of herself. Not just for her, but for everyone else in the family who wasn't able to do so. Instead of fulfilling that, she was shot dead in front of her new house. Ruth died in the Langmore trailer compound. She was able to put some lipstick on the pig before she went, but ultimately did little more than that. Is that really a satisfying ending for our main rooting interest in the show? As unsatisfying as it may have been, I have to give credit where credit's due. It made sense. It didn't come out of nowhere like Game of Thrones, and it didn't just completely end like something like The Sopranos did. My main complaint is that it felt like it ended too soon. The end of season 4 would have been a decent cliffhanger for a new season, but it feels unfinished as the last page of a story. Successful endings answer a story's biggest question. For Ozark, that question is, how did these people escape the clutches of a drug cartel? By the end of Breaking Bad, the White family is out. Walter has become a monster, but he died saving the one person that he hurt the most along the way. That's about as much redemption as we could hope for under the circumstances. For Jesse, he's free. He has a suboptimal, trauma-ridden life ahead of him, but he's alive, and that's enough. By the end of Ozark, the birds are just involved in the cartel as ever. Jonah is a murderer, and the only character who truly deserves to survive this ordeal is dead. The car crash that began and ended season 4 was the most on-the-nose metaphor I've seen in a while, complete with Marty exiting first and Wendy barely making it out of the car. It was so obvious that even Wendy picked up on it, nearly shattering the fourth wall in the process. But the metaphor is flawed, because the car's still flipping. We don't get to see where it lands. With all of that said, I still like Ozark. The characters that the show presented were some of the best I've seen in a long time. Jason Bateman really cemented himself as more than a comedic straight man with this performance, and I'm excited to see him in other dramatic roles in the future. The ending wasn't bad enough to ruin the whole show for me. A bad ending doesn't erase the shocking and anxiety-inducing moments of Ozark's high points. This isn't a Game of Thrones level failure. I'd liken it to Dexter, a great show that just didn't know how to wrap it up cleanly. I got the sense that the Ozark showrunners didn't want to overstay their welcome. They didn't want to drag things out longer than it needed to be. The problem with that is that they cut things too short. There were too many unanswered questions. We could have had a satisfying, bittersweet conclusion. Instead, we got... I'm new to this whole YouTube thing, but I really enjoyed writing this video and plan on making more. If you made it this far, do me a favor and like and subscribe. If I missed something, let me know in the comments. I'm excited to hear what other people have to say about the ending. Stay safe.